it really is an honour to be here tonight for starters, and it's always a privilege to speak alongside Dr. Susan Power, who is almost my friend at this point now. I met Susan back in 2018, actually, when I was in the West Bank, and Susan brought me around and showed me the reality of the situation, and it was absolutely shocking, and will stay with me to the day I die. As I got into Gaza that year as well, and Gaza and the West Bank, Palestinian people will always have my heart fully. So I am really delighted to be here, and it's always a privilege to be able to talk with people like yourselves who get it, who understand what's happening there. And I think Susan has just given the most unbelievable presentation. We need to get you out and talking all over the country, Susan. We all know the last 6 months have been absolutely catastrophic, barbaric, and anyone who has been involved, and I know all of you have, in Palestinian solidarity activism, is aware of the barbaric stuff that's happening, the brutality that Israel and its allies are capable of. The genocide in Gaza is really unprecedented, and the carpet bombing of captive population trapped in an open-air prison without any means of escape. It's almost impossible, it's beyond belief, it's impossible to comprehend. And I know you're all seeing the same footage that I'm seeing of the death and destruction on the news and social media, that we're all seeing it. And I'm not going to go into all of that, because I think Susan has done an absolutely fantastic job on that. And I would imagine that some of you might be probably haunted, as I am, by some of the pictures that we see of children buried under the rubble of what was once their family home. And in the words of the Irish barrister Nina Negrali, a member of South Africa's legal team in their case against Israel at the International Court of Justice, she said, "This is the first genocide in history where its victims are broadcasting their own destruction in real time in the desperate, so far vain hope that the world will do something." And I think that always stays with me. I mean, Israel feels that it's above international law. Gaza is on the brink of destruction because for too long Western countries have refused to hold Israel to account for its crimes against the Palestinian people. At the beginning of the latest war in Gaza, I organised a presentation via Zoom by Mustafa Barghouti of the Palestinian National Initiative and Daniel Levy of the US Middle East Project for members of the Oireachtas and their staff. And I might get Susan into the Oireachtas at some time as well. And in that meeting, Daniel Levy, who is a senior Israeli advisor during the Oslo Accords negotiations, said that in the case of Israel, impunity has been the handmaiden of extremism. This is such an important point, and the international community's failure to hold Israel accountable for its crimes against the Palestinians has made Israel believe that they can get away with anything. And let me say this, and I just want to say this, and I want to touch on this a little bit. But we are seeing the massive global uprising against the genocide that has brought millions of people onto the streets all over the world. In many countries, people are speaking out for Palestine despite police repression, censorship and threats. And I want to say that that's really inspiring. And I know, because we can lose the will to even contemplate the powerlessness is beyond belief. And I suppose what I'm saying here is that it's brilliant to be here tonight. This is a really important meeting because you're all here because you want to know what can we do. And it is inspiring, and that's happening in countries all over the world. Everybody's up in arms about this. The people of the world are up in arms around this, yet the governing bodies are doing absolutely nothing. That's something that I can't get my head around, which is just, they're not listening to the people. So I want to say that there's hope in that, okay? I just want to give a little light of hope in everybody out marching, going on a march tomorrow in Dublin, in London, in New York, all over the world. And I'm not so sure how much it will change things, but I do believe something has to give. So many people, sorry, I'm lost here. South Africa's brave, oh yeah, it is, and South Africa's brave decision to take the case against Israel, I know it's very slow, in the ICJ under Genocide Convention is a game changer in fairness. However, the Israel's strategy of terror attacks against Syria, Lebanon and Iran to try and provoke a broader regional conflict and direct attention away from Gaza could be beginning to bear fruit, and that's really, really upsetting, and we have to keep up the pressure. We have to keep the pressure on, and that's why I'm here tonight. It's about keeping that pressure going. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the Occupied Territories Bill, which I introduced in the Shannon back in early 2018. It's designed, the Occupied Territories Bill is designed to ban trade with illegal settlements in the West Bank, which Susan very kindly showed me. It was drafted obviously with Palestine in mind, but the occupied territories would also apply to illegal settlements in occupied Ukraine or Western Sahara, and if adopted in Ireland and elsewhere, it would make the illegal occupation increasingly costly and ultimately economically and diplomatically unviable. And this is necessary, this is a really necessary prerequisite for achieving peace and Palestinian self-determination. There are hundreds and thousands of illegal Israeli settlers in stolen Palestinian lands who are stealing resources from and enacting violence on indigenous Palestinians, and Susan spoke very clearly about that. And I don't think we even realise how bad it is, to be honest with you. I mean, we can talk about it, but I can't even imagine what it must be like for a Palestinian, for somebody to be walking down the street and for armed settlers to be coming up and terrorising them and maybe shooting them, you know, or children. I mean, it's really, I think it's a lot worse than we can even imagine. So the bill was inspired, I just want to say, those settlers are armed and protected by the Israeli military, and they kill and steal from Palestinians with total impunity. Total impunity. So the bill is inspired by our strategic thinking about Western inaction. That's what really inspired it, on Israel's decades-long impunity in the face of international law. And it continuously violates international law in so many ways, as Susan said, including its de facto annexation of the occupied Palestinian territories, its transfer to civilian population into the occupied territories, and countless other offences. And Ireland has been one of the most vocal Western critics of Israeli human rights abuses. Irish people have been so passionately supportive of Palestinian liberation because, I believe, of our own history of anti-colonial resistance. But unfortunately, successive Irish governments have failed to take concrete action, and it's very frustrating, I have to tell you. I think the UN Special Rapporteur for Palestine, Francesca Albanese, who you saw a picture of there a few minutes ago, said it best in a recent speech that she made in Galway. She said there's a tendency to be very supportive and rhetoric, as Ireland has, but when it comes to taking concrete action, there is zero. So I'll give you a couple of examples of that. I mean, we've seen our own politicians, we've seen many ministers coming out, and even our Taoiseach have said, what's happening is terrible in Palestine, and you know, we have to do something about it. They make these huge big statements, but there's no action behind it. And that's really worrying. And then everybody goes, oh, Ireland are really great, Ireland doing great, they're all, they're criticising Israel. But it's not enough. It's absolutely not enough. So I introduced the Occupied Territories Bill to disrupt the cycle. That's why I brought it in. It was to disrupt this cycle of condemnation and inaction, because I wanted to take concrete action. And again, we did this by presenting a proposal containing the minimum possible demand, and I do believe it's the minimum possible demand, of banning goods originating in the settlements that are universally recognised as illegal It could force the Irish government and perhaps other governments to turn their words into actions. That's why the Occupied Territories Bill is so important. It could be the beginning, really, the beginning of something really powerful worldwide. Now the bill, just to tell you what happened with the bill, I mean, I could write a book, to be honest with you. Susan was with me on that journey. We were both devastated when, when we got it to a certain stage. I'll just very briefly, and I'll try not to talk too long, but when I introduced it in January of 2018, and the Fianna Fáil were not having any, the Fine Gael were not having any, neither of them were having any, right? And so in the meantime I went out and I withdrew the bill. I brought it in and then I said I'm going to withdraw it because I knew it wasn't going to go anywhere. In the meantime there was a change of ministers. So Darragh O'Brien was the Minister for Foreign Affairs at the time, and Niall Collins from Limerick, he became the Minister. And we convinced him and Billy Kelleher to go to the West Bank, where they met Susan. And Susan really convinced them of the importance of why Fianna Fáil should support the Occupied Territories Bill. And I had spoken with Simon Coveney, and Simon Coveney was absolutely having none of it. No way was this going to happen. So at the time it was a minority government, and so there was this kind of pact where Fianna Fáil were going to support with Fine Gael, and they were kind of in cahoots together. But anyway, but when Niall Collins came back, he put a tweet up going, Fianna Fáil are supporting the Occupied Territories Bill, never even saying it to me or anything. And it just all hell broke loose in the meantime, because we couldn't believe it. We were going, oh my God, this is fantastic, because it was a minority government, which means if Fianna Fáil supported this, it was going to pass. And we got it very quickly through the Seanad. I mean, it was just a miracle that we got it through the Seanad. Then the bill was then introduced in the Dáil by Niall Collins. He brought it in. It passed its first vote in the Dáil by a wide margin, supported by all political parties, obviously except for Fine Gael. And then some of the independent MPs, TDs also didn't support it. They were, I suppose, independent TDs who supported, who were supporting Fine Gael in the minority government. It also passed an important vote in the Foreign Affairs Committee before stalling in committee stage. So the bill had passed 7 out of 10 stages. We'd only 3 more stages to go before legislation. So there was 7 out of 10 required in the Oireachtas before legislation is sent to the President to sign into law. And it could be implemented rapidly if the political will was there, but unfortunately all the progress was halted because of this current government. There was an election called, so what happened was it just wasn't, they couldn't agree on the programme for government when they were working on it. And that was probably the most devastating time I've experienced in Leinster House, because I realised quite quickly that this was not going to happen. Anyway, the current government have blocked it, and so Fianna Fáil and the Green Party had the bill. Now I want to say this, they had the bill in their 2020 general election manifestos. So they were going around telling people, we're going to pass the Occupied Territories Bill. And then as soon as the election was called, and what they say is that it's blocked on 2 grounds. Firstly, it says it has illegal advice that says the bill is incompatible with EU law. And we know for a fact that this is false, because we have had many academic experts and lawyers telling us that that's not the case. So that's firstly not true. The government often uses this, they often do that, where they use this confidential legal advice provided by the Attorney General as an excuse not to do things that the public wants it to do. So they use that excuse all the time. And I find it so frustrating, I find it dishonest and anti-democratic. But it's a clear signal that they've lost the political and moral argument and have ceded that ground, and instead they obscure the issue with technical jargon and legal fictions. And the government also claims the bill would be unhelpful because it would undermine their efforts to work with other EU member states to bring them to a more sensible position. And as we can see from a hugely biased anti-Palestinian rhetoric coming out of the EU, this is not credible or plausible position. So we have to be mindful of that. The government needs to act to uphold international law and to reflect the people's support of the people of Palestine. And passing the Occupied Territories Bill would be a message to the entire world that Ireland takes human rights and international law seriously, and if we act, others will follow, just like in apartheid South Africa back in the 80s when 2 women refused to take the oranges, and we were the ones that led out on the apartheid, the whole system of apartheid. Ireland led out, and others followed. So we can do that again with the Occupied Territories Bill. And the reason I'm giving you so much detail about the Occupied Territories Bill is just to give you a good understanding. So is that when your government reps come knocking on your door, looking for votes, you have to say, I will not vote for you until or unless you pass the Occupied Territories Bill. Palestine has to be a priority. It has to be a priority. Because we see what's happening. And Ireland, we are very much a human rights, particularly the people. I'm not so sure about the government, you know. But we have to fight for that, and I think that's what's absolutely vital. We do appear to be taking the small steps, and the Irish Strategic Investment Fund has been directed to divest from several firms operating in illegal Israeli settlements. And I think that legislation was brought in by Sinn Féin. John Brady brought that piece of legislation in. And there is talk as well of recognising Palestinian statehood, although it is worth remembering that Ireland first voiced support for that position way back in 1980, like 44 years ago. And there was a Dáil resolution about it back in 2014, and still nothing has been done. Let's talk. Now, I still think that we need the actual Occupied Territories Bill is way ahead, and I'm sure Susan would agree with me on that, of recognising Palestine. If Ireland is serious about Palestinian statehood, we need to take action against the illegal Israeli settlements which undermine the geographic and demographic basis of a future Palestinian state. Illegal settlements in the occupied West Bank has increased fourfold since the Oslo Accords, as Susan said earlier, was signed in the 90s, and Israel is trying to sabotage any prospect of Palestinian independence. So recognising Palestinian statehood without passing the Occupied Territories Bill is, I believe, an empty gesture. So we must do more. Symbolic measures and tiny steps forward won't stop a genocide. We need economic and diplomatic sanctions. Israel needs to be made a pariah like apartheid South Africa was. Sinn Féin has promised to pass and enact the Occupied Territories Bill if they get into the next government, and that's very, very important, and we must hold them to that. It was reported recently that Irish exports of dual-use items which have both military and civilian functions to Israel grew from 11 million euros to 70 million euros last year. That's quite shocking when you think of it. And it's obscene, and I want to say this, that it's absolutely obscene that we're exporting goods to Israel that can be used for military purposes as they commit genocide. When I realised, oh my God, Ireland is complicit in this. It was absolutely shocking, and it has to stop. This has to stop. The Minister for Enterprise has the power to approve or to block these exports. He is letting this trade happen. He's given these companies a green light to trade with apartheid Israel. The Minister of Transport is allowing cargo planes to pass through Ireland without a proper inspection of their cargo. And it's very likely that weapons bound for Israel are passing through Shannon Airport. So myself and my colleagues in the Shannon Civil Engagement Group have introduced legislation that would forbid ministers of transport from approving exports of military or dual-use goods to Israel or to countries that send weapons to Israel. And we need to pass the arms embargo bill so that our government can't make us complicit in Israeli war crimes. Urgent action is needed in this area. I was really, really happy to see the sizable protest against US military's use of Shannon Airport last Sunday. I thought that was really powerful, fantastic. I'm sure maybe some of you were there.
We had fun.
Yes, and thank you for that. We need to stand up for the interlocking principles of global solidarity and Irish military neutrality. We need to keep marching. I know, like, that's really important. Those marches every Saturday that are happening here are so important. They're absolutely vital. And I know it can be exhausting. I know when we're looking at Twitter and we're looking at all the, you know, and I even feel I'm in a group, an apartheid arts group of musicians and everything, and I even feel they're becoming depleted. And I'm really trying to say to them, please, we need to keep going. We have to keep going. We have to keep the pressure on. We must never give up. Ireland must never give up on this. So we need to stand up for the interlocking principles of global solidarity and Irish military neutrality. We need to keep marching, and we need to keep pressuring our elected representatives. Now, and I'll say this to you, you're going to have your government, I'm saying this again and I'm repeating myself, but I really do think it's important. You're going to have your government candidates who will be canvassing for votes ahead of the local and European elections. And I think this is absolutely vitally important, that we all signal our rejection of the genocidal, racist, pro-Israel policies of Ursula von der Leyen, the European Commission, by returning MEPs who stand firm against militarism and Palestinian liberation. I want you to think about that. You know what I mean? That we get people in there who really understand and who will not stand for what the likes of Ursula von der Leyen is saying and what her policies are. Politicians need to be hearing about Palestine and the Occupied Territories Bill on the doors and in their email boxes. And I think that's what I'm here to ask you to do tonight, particularly government politicians. I'm asking you to please keep emailing them. Never give up on those phone calls. When they come knocking on your door, keep talking about Palestine. Talk about the Occupied Territories Bill, the importance of the Occupied Territories Bill. And also, just to say to you, and I know Cork are probably one of the best places, counties, you know, for the work that you do in the solidarity, the Palestinian solidarity. I'm very involved in the one in Dublin. I'm also the chair of the anti-apartheid campaign, where there's a whole load of different NGOs. We all come together, unions, so many different organisations have come together and with regard to the anti-apartheid campaign, and we're constantly working. But getting these local groups together who will commit to writing to your local government TDs and councillors and all of that. And I think it's a modest action that can have a huge impact, a huge impact. I see it, you don't understand, I didn't know until I got into Leinster House how important the votes are for politicians. That's really what they want the votes. Yeah. And that's where you have the power. You have much more power. I wouldn't have thought it myself, but you have much more power than you can even imagine. And that's what their main aim is, votes, right? And obviously they have their own ideas on policies, but for government TDs, we have to get Palestine up there and the Occupied Territories Bill up there. So I think it's a modest action that can have a huge impact. Elections are the best time to apply this kind of pressure. We have to keep fighting. Again, I can't express that enough. We have to keep going for a free Palestine and an Ireland that stands for human rights, international law and decolonisation without fear or favour. So thank you very, very much. I'll be at the march tomorrow. Also, these badges over here to support the Cork Palestine Solidarity Campaign. These are badges that I got as a present from somebody. They sent them to me, and it says, what does it say there? Genocide, yeah. So please support Cork Palestine Solidarity. We're doing a phenomenal job. And thank you all so much for coming tonight, and I'll see you at the march tomorrow. Please, please.